Now more than ever, I think we would all agree that leaders need to speak up and need to have compelling voices. The shooting of Ahmaud Arbery, the brutal suffocation of George Floyd, and a long series of similar tragedies has brought racism within us and within our society to a head. We've asked two stellar communication executives to share their experience and thoughts on how you help your leaders speak up. In this conversation, both Karen and Maria are going to share some personal stories, some best practices, and some insights. For this session, I really do want to point out that they're not speaking on behalf of their brands. They're speaking on behalf of themselves and their life experiences. So the two folks I'm going to welcome to join us momentarily is my friend Karen, who is Senior Vice President of Corporate Communications at Landmark Financial Services, and Maria, Senior Vice President of Corporate Marketing, Communications, and External Affairs for NCR Corporation. Now, we love our friends at Microsoft, but as we were about ready to start the session, Karen had to install something courtesy of Redmond. So, but she's back online. And Maria had a computer gremlin too. She's going to pop in a second. But I'm going to go ahead and toss it over to Karen. I'm going to ask her to introduce herself and share with us a little bit about her experiences that brought her to where she is today.
Thanks, Mike. And I will say first of all, I'm a little panicked here because I'm watching a red indicator. So I'm hopeful that IT can kind of fix my issue that I'm having here in the background. But if I suddenly disappear, you'll understand why, and we'll try to rectify that in some kind of way. Gotta love technology. I'm Karen Clay, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Communications for Landmark Financial Services. Landmark is a financial services company. We lend consumer loans to middle America, Main Street, really. Many of the heroes that we are all celebrating that work the front lines. We have 19 states that with about 370 branches. And as I like to say, we are brick and click, meaning we are a hybrid of branch in person as well as online lending. We are celebrating our 25th anniversary next year, which is very exciting. And I just joined the company not quite a year ago to stand up the PR and communications function, because while the company is 25 years old, we were, for the majority of that time, a subsidiary of BB&T and spun off just several years ago. So communications and PR is a new function for our company and our organization. I've been here in Atlanta for about 25 years. I'm a Los Angeles, California native, and that very much informs the topic that we're going to be speaking about today. Married to the love of my life for 30 years, and we have 3 kids together, 2, I can't call them boys. One, the oldest, just celebrated his 25th birthday yesterday. Oh my gosh. And a middle son in college, and our youngest is our daughter.
Good thing I've been trained in live TV. There's nothing like a virtual event when there aren't gremlins. So it appears that Karen's battery has totally expired, but Maria is joining us right now as if it were on cue.
Thanks, Mike. Can you hear me well? Okay, great. And thanks everybody for your patience and for waiting. We absolutely did have technology gremlins this morning. I had it for probably 2.5 hours, thanks to a software push. In any way, I figured it out through personal email. So we're here. First and foremost, I'm very grateful to Team Marchetti and to Mike for organizing this despite the virtual environment and the distancing, and keeping us all connected and sharing. I am a native of Belgrade, Serbia, and I was born and raised and spent half of my life there. It's also some of you may know it as a former Yugoslavia. And then since '95, the second half of my life I spent in the United States. So I'm an immigrant. I'm giving you some of those details because I think it informs my perspective in many ways on the topic that Karen and I will address today. I've had quite a long and rewarding journey here in the U.S. and I'm one of those people who came here because I saw it as the dreamland and as the land of opportunities where anything can happen if you put your mind to it and you put your energy into it. Hi, Karen.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good, and I'm back. And sorry about that. I had told them that I might get popped out because they were trying to fix it, and it is fixed. So we're good now.
Okay, great. I was just getting started with my introduction, and
Right.
and so I was describing my my entrance into the United States and the land of opportunity. And the land of where dreams come true. And that's how I really approached the United States in June of '95. And it's been a long journey. I lived in Chicago several years, moved on to Washington, D.C., all over the world. And I've pretty much since then been a global citizen, traveling a lot for the jobs that I had. Had a long career in the tech sector. Some big brand names that you will recognize. Among them are IBM and NCR. And I've had experience in supply chain, trade, corporate strategy, public affairs, government affairs, market access, marketing communications, of course, and a range of external affairs and advocacy. I'm responsible currently for all marketing, all communications and external affairs at NCR. And it's just a joy to be able to work with a phenomenal team of people and really reimagine a 136-year-old brand into a new software and services tech brand that truly delivers a new promise to banks and to restaurants and to retailers. And it's really fun, it's challenging, and it's rewarding at the same time. So all that to say is that why did I, choose to participate in today's topic and share my views? Well, first and foremost, I've worked with Mike for a long time, and I want to thank him for opening up the dialogue on this topic within this forum. Second, I was super impressed with Karen. What Karen and I spent, it was supposed to be a 15-minute intro. It ended up being an hour and 15 minutes. And I got even more jazzed up about sharing this platform with her. And I, as someone who has immigrated into the United States and then became a citizen, I have some genuine concerns. I was very young and perhaps somewhat naive, and did not necessarily see the side of US that has come to light in a very forward way this year. And I was always open-minded and looking to learn, and always saw US as the most wonderful place where you can meet anyone from anywhere. And as someone who comes from a country that has fallen apart because of nationalism and demagogues and really polarized sides, I kind of tend to worry about what I see happening here now. And so I deeply care about this topic. The other thing I didn't tell you is that I'm also a mom of two amazing young ladies and a wife to a Black man. And my children are what's considered here mixed race. So this is personal on every level. So that's me, Maria.
So you can see kind of why Mike asked us both. I think I eked out most of my background before I got cut off, but I'm informed by obviously being African American, female, being California native, as I said, really informs it a lot. Having two male sons, just all of that. And so our biggest challenge, I think, Maria, will be focusing on the aspects of our topic that relate to our audience, most of whom are, if they're not, marketing specific, we've got marketers, we've got PR, we've got internal communicators, seem to be the three main buckets of roles, and then those that, kind of span and oversee all of that. And you and I did, talk a lot about several different things, but maybe we can start with sort of, why are we having this conversation with this audience? What's the role? I'll say the role of CMO, but you fill in your title there. But what is our role as marketers, as communicators, given that our main tools that we bring to the table are words and creativity? Words and creativity. I think we have a responsibility to help lead the conversation within our companies about the best version of our brands that we represent. Making clear what companies stand for is core to our influence. And we just heard, Roy and others talk about different aspects of influence. And I know that Maria and I will dig into that a little bit, but I would say the other thing is that the public is really demanding moral and economic leadership within the corporate sector. And it's really a different time. And so it's an opportunity for us as marketers to kind of help lead the charge. Maria, what's your thought? Just high level role of CMO, using that term broadly.
Absolutely. I tend to agree on every level, Karen. And here's why. Whether you're B2C or B2B business, and you're in marketing and communications today, you really understand that you have to foster a personal and emotional connection with your customers and with your employees, and with your community, right? With all your stakeholders. And you also have to focus on keeping up the market demand. So in the past, you might have seen your job as super MROI oriented or demand gen oriented, but that thing called the narrative and that thing called the truth and the values behind the narrative has become as important as your ability to drive growth. Customers and talent, because of how our society operates today, because we have everything exposed in the digital space, because we compete for attention in the digital space, customers and talent, the future talent, our future workforce, the community, the government officials, the investors are sizing us up all the time. And not just your products, not just your value prop, they're actually looking at your values too, right? This is why we have a lot of attention now given in at least the public sector, the publicly traded companies, a lot of attention given to ESG, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
People actually size up what you stand for. Does your purpose reflect your values as well, and how you create value in the market? And so when the business aligns its mission and its purpose and authentically acts on it, right, through words and actions, you engage the audience emotionally. And that's truly the task behind the CMO and the CCO. You have to kind of be the carrier and the translator of the values, and you have to uphold the truth.
Yeah.
In ways. And that's a really big word. And I think, so that's from a very professional perspective. From a Maria perspective, our job is just to address it as humans and uphold human dignity, period. Right? It was very simple for me personally.
But for you and I, it's a little bit different because of, who we are and our life story. But let's just be real and honest, for a lot of people, you can kind of choose to wake up in the morning and not really have to deal with this if you don't want to. Especially, I think in B2B, it's easier for us to kind of not have to be out there. I mean, if you're B2C, definitely if you're B2C in a public brand, you don't have a choice, right? This is not one you can dodge. But if you're B2B and if you're private and if you're mid-sized, right? You don't really have to, meaning the marketplace isn't demanding that you address it. But I agree with you, that's not the point. It's necessary. It really is necessary. And it's also a way for companies to separate themselves from others. But it can take courage, actually, to be that person who brings it up when it hasn't been thrust upon an organization, right? I mean, I think that's one of the interesting things. Maybe we can explore that a little bit between the difference between our two companies, because for you with NCR, it was thrust upon NCR and other global public companies. You can't dodge it, right? It's important how you address it, but you couldn't dodge it. For a Landmark that is 2,000 employees, private, we didn't really have to do much of anything. And I suspect, looking at the list of our attendees, for this conference, there are a lot of companies in that realm. So for those of you in that realm, I would say it is even more important, right? Because and it might take courage, actually, and you might be the lone voice. And if you're not a person of color yourself, which you probably aren't, you might not feel equipped. I've heard a lot of colleagues say versions of, but I'm not really equipped. And I'm just going to say to you in love, get over that. It's okay to not be an expert, but it is not okay to be silent. Even if it's not coming up organically, it is incumbent upon you as leaders and as communication and marketing and brand leaders to be the one that raises it, even if only internally. Because unless you have no people of color within your workforce, which I doubt is the case, I can guarantee you it's on their minds. It's on their minds. They're having to deal with real fear, real emotions that they don't get to check at they do have to check it at the door, actually, which is part of the problem, because it's not okay to bring those kinds of emotions and fears to work, which is not right, but it is the reality of being Black and brown in corporate America. But having said that, this is a different time, and there's a lot of different things that you can do. What were some of the things that NCR did as a public company? And then I'll kind of flip back and share kind of some of the things we did this summer following George Floyd.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share. You touched on some really, really good points, and I'll try to contain my answer, and then we can maybe explore courage a bit more as a follow-up. I would say, let me start first with what I did, and then what we did as a company. So for me, I didn't even think of it as courage. I thought of it as something that must be addressed. So that Monday morning, our first call was at 8 a.m. with my team. And I didn't ask for permission of anyone. I didn't ask for talking points. I said that for me, that was, I could not agree, that I was appalled, that I was upset, that I was afraid, and that I could not believe that I was witnessing that in the United States. And that for me, it was a matter of human dignity, and that I could understand why people were angry and on the streets. Not that I condone violence in any way, shape, or form, but that when people have no voice, they tend to resort to that. And I personally experienced it, right, when I was a teenager.
Sure, right.
Right. And so I literally said that, probably in a better way with more passion, to my team that morning. And what was interesting is that there were phone calls that happened immediately after, from my Black colleagues. Were crying. They were touched. They just wanted to say thank you for opening something and saying something that nobody ever does. People don't feel comfortable addressing this
Yeah.
at work, right?
Yeah.
And then my white American colleagues called and said, "Thank you so much for saying something. I'm so uncomfortable saying anything."
Yeah.
There were those phone calls as well.
Yeah.
And we can go there and talk about that because it's
Yeah.
a very interesting subject. So that was step one for me personally. Then the next phone call was with my CEO and COO, and I have to tell you, I'm lucky, blessed that I have a CEO who is approachable and very transparent, and he didn't need convincing. He knew
Yeah.
that he wanted to immediately communicate immediately to all employees and to the customers, to all of our customers. So there had to be a communication on our website, and email communication to all of our customers, and immediate communication to all of our worldwide employees, because this was a worldwide matter. And one of the things that as we talked about what we should say, what we concluded, what was the most important thing to do immediately was to actually not talk much, but to listen.
Mm-hmm.
For him as a leader of a company to meet with our business resource group, we have business resource groups, and Black Professionals Forum is one of them, and to meet in a smaller, intimate forum, just the CEO, and the business resource group, and to offer that in the communication and say, I want to hear from you. I want to know what you're experiencing. I want to meet and I want to listen to everything. Right?
I remember you sharing that, and I took note on that because we're going to do that. That's kind of like our next step. Our journey was similar, so I'll follow your lead and start with the personal.
Right.
The personal for me was same emotions, and again, 25-year-old, 21-year-old Black male sons, right? Who I'm watching them, and I'm watching my New York Bronx native husband react to this, and my heart broke on so many levels. And so that Monday, and as we're talking about Monday, we're talking about the Monday following George Floyd. That Monday, I did what a lot of us do. I wrote a LinkedIn article. It's kind of what sparked me being here on this platform with Mike, because I needed to get it out around what is our role as business leaders, to not be silent, because this was and has been a situation that is not going away, and it spans across all industries and all companies. It's not a Black thing, it's a humanity thing, to be clear. So personally, I was really fraught. And for the first time, and this may or may not land, with you listening, but you heard me say a minute ago about it's unprofessional for Black people to bring their fears to work. So we don't talk about it. We it happens, and we show, and we do our job. But I was over it. I was angry. I happened to have a one-on-one with my boss that morning, and she asked, "How are you doing?" Innocently. I said, "I'm not good. I'm not okay." And so let's talk about why I'm not okay. I never have done that in my whole entire career, right? But I was kind of over avoiding making anybody around me feel comfortable. That's a really important point. I want to repeat that. I was over avoiding making others around me who don't look like me uncomfortable. In fact, I kind of leaned into making everybody around me feel uncomfortable. I wasn't belligerent, I wasn't unprofessional, but it just kind of got to that point. And in my one-on-one conversations with our individual C-suite, I shared with them the things I shared in the LinkedIn article, one of which is we're 2,000 employees, so you need to personally reach out to every Black employee in your organization. Now, we're small enough with 2,000 that, that meant, maybe they had to call 30 people at most. That's not reasonable if you're a global organization and you have 60,000 employees. But there are other ways to achieve that. The point I was making to them, was it was important because these employees were hurt and harmed and not okay. And they needed to know that the values that we espouse aren't just a plaque on the wall. And so when genuine, and I must say I am too very blessed that our C-suite they're wonderful human beings, but a couple of them basically expressed the version of, but I'm not equipped. And I used an analogy and said, and so I'm challenging you with this analogy for those listening in. If a close friend of yours spouse passed away unexpectedly, most of us are not comfortable or feel equipped to be grief counselors. But it doesn't keep us from reaching out and doing the best we can, even if it's awkward and uncomfortable and we feel ill-equipped. We don't let our personal feelings of ineptitude keep us from reaching out, because that would mean we would really be kind of horrible as friends. This was no different. You didn't need to have a PhD in race relations to just be humane and call. And so they did call. And like you, I was very fortunate to have a CEO who I didn't have to twist his arm. I just gave some coaching around certain things like speak their names. And that continues to be important because George Floyd wasn't the first and he unfortunately won't be the last. And so as we progress forward, it is important for you as communicators and marketers and influencers within your companies to advise your leaders to continue to speak names and speak specifically and not in euphemisms. One of the simple but powerful questions that my CEO asked me is, how should I refer to it? Meaning what had just happened that weekend, George Floyd. Right? And the tendency, I think, is to kind of soften things with terms like the social injustice, which drives me crazy, right? No, racial reckoning is what I told him, because that's what it is, right? It's a racial reckoning. And so as wordsmithers, if that is a word, that is a very practical but important role that you play in guiding the words that we use when we are talking about this racial reckoning. Have leaders use specific terms. It lends to the thing you just heard Roy Reed and others talk about, the trust factor. Part of that trust, it was taking copious notes, is around clarity, presence, candor, he said, transparency. All of those things factor in the words that we choose. So that's really, really important. And then Maria, you talked about the Black employees and their response. And same here, I've got emails and letters, that were sent that just said, thank you. I've never heard this. I appreciate this. And, I'm a practical person, so I'm gonna bring this back to not the humane part of this, but the business part of why that Black employee response matters, because it goes directly to employee engagement. And no matter who you are, you need to have fully engaged employees. You've heard the stats, whether it's Gallup or whoever you follow, for decades now, they have said that employee engagement performs. I'm looking at the most recent Gallup, top quartile companies. Engaged employees drive 21% higher productivity, 37% less absenteeism, 22% higher profitability. As I said to my C-suite, if you don't believe those numbers, even if you cut those percentages in half, would it be helpful to have 11% higher profitability? That's significant, really, really significant. So the business case is as strong as just the case of it's the right thing to do, to speak up. So, I mean, I know, Maria, you and I could talk about this forever. We've got about 5 minutes, so maybe we can, between us, do a lightning round of takeaways, actionable takeaways for our audience.
Before we do that, if that's okay, if I can connect to something you said, which I think is really important. The other credit that I give to our leadership team and our CEO is understanding that, when we say words, and I think Karen was very specific there, it's words and actions. Platitudes don't work. People see them right away.
Straight through it.
The LinkedIn posts about donations, the one-time action, forget about it. People see through it, right?
Yes.
Unless you actually, after that forum where we had an open listening session with our employees, with the Black Professionals Forum, after that we had another one. All right, and then we appointed a leadership, D&I council, and we said, you know what, we have work to do on our talent strategy, and we have work to do on university recruiting, and we have to set some targets in university recruiting. And we actually, yes, of course we donated, and I don't want to undermine the importance of supporting organizations who work on this. You absolutely should, but that's not enough. That's really not enough.
More. And all of those things are very measurable. Yeah, to do that. It's a combination,
Correct.
It's a combination of action and words, and I would say relationship, because it can't skew too far where everything is a program either, right? Those relationships, those ongoing conversations, honest conversations, hard conversations that require courage and trust, but are so, so important internally with partners and others. So what are some things that folks listening in can do tangibly besides the few that we've shared? What's top of your list?
Top of my list in terms of, so first and foremost, you can always engage in addition to listening to your employees and having an ongoing engaging communication on these issues. You really need to take a deep look at the employee engagement and how it relates to your talent strategy, and whether your talent strategy is actually reflecting that you value diversity and inclusion, right? So start getting into a dialogue around metrics, not because we believe in caps or anything like that, but because unless you don't measure it, you really won't know if you're moving the needle.
That's right.
Period.
That's
right? I would say the other thing that's really key, and I believe in training. I believe in training. There's fun way to do training. You don't have to be boring like the regular cybersecurity and code of conduct training that we all take every year. You can actually make this more engaging. Mm-hmm. And training is, in my opinion, beyond important, especially in the area of unconscious bias. Mm-hmm. And microaggressions.
Yes.
Because that's where the danger lies. That's where the problem can actually get solved in a really personal way.
Yes.
All of us, if you think you don't have an unconscious bias, examine yourself. All of us have it. All of us have at least one. And I think if you actually, once you go through that training, you will realize when it's happened, how it's happened, and how you can actually address it, or how you can build some skills to manage it more effectively and proactively. Then, and only then, will you be in a position to have courage to have the uncomfortable conversations, the conversations that might have been uncomfortable before. I actually think that's key. So if you have not done that, that's probably step number one. And then I don't want to undermine if you are in a position of power and injustice has ever happened to you. Imagine how it feels to someone who's not in a position of power. I remind myself of that every single day.
Mhm.
And with that comes responsibility. And one of my key takeaways is not saying anything is actually saying something.
It's saying a lot,
It's saying a lot.
and being silent is not acceptable.
Not
Yeah,
acceptable.
yeah,
Not on these topics.
no,
And so I deeply believe that there's a takeaway for you as individual leaders who are responsible for brand voice to
yes,
actually advance your enterprise, your organization, your institution, no matter what the size is, into having these conversations and being uncomfortable having these conversations. And that's not an easy task. And Karen is very good at it. And you can call, you can ask for advice anytime. But I think, again, approach this programmatically, approach this from a perspective of human dignity, understand that no one can change the world overnight.
right.
However, our little world where we are, our little platform where
Yeah.
we operate, we absolutely have the power to change.
That's a really important point too, right? Because this can feel overwhelming in one sense, or kind of like it's not my issue, but it is. It's the world, the sphere of influence that we each have, and we do each have a sphere of influence, right? Personally and within our network and in our companies that we lead teams and groups. It's really important with that. I'm gonna jump on what you said about training and say, take responsibility for educating yourself, right? Read, leaders are readers. Read, number one. Number two, don't lean on your Black friends and colleagues and the DNI officer, if you have one, to fill that role. Take that responsibility on yourself. And to those with less power beneath you, they are open and itching to share. Have a virtual coffee with a few Black colleagues on your team, on somebody else's team, and just ask them microaggressions. I don't really see that in our company. Have you experienced it here? Have you experienced it elsewhere? Tell me what it is. You will not, it'll be a longer coffee than you expect, right? And that's a way of educating, but at the same time, you're engaging and showing that you care. Because when you ask an employee about those things that no one ever asked them about, it says that you see them. And that is really, really important. I would also encourage you to be creative in your partnerships internally. If you don't regularly check in with HR, if you have a DNI officer, ERGs, as you've heard Maria say, reach out to them because they can be a wealth of information and partnership. And then challenge your team, especially if you're B2B, because nobody, as I said, nobody is untouched. A mentor of mine, Brian Lewis, told me early in my important lesson in my career that the quality of your questions determines the quality of the response. So instead of asking your team, is there anything we should be doing or could be doing, ask them, what can we do? How could we make a difference? Because it takes you in a different trajectory when you ask those questions in that way. And then to commit to diversifying your events. Everything's virtual these days. Our caddies have done a terrific job of diversifying this event. You probably have events as well. Diversify your events and get more voices out there. So Maria, maybe you and I can kind of write up some things and give those to Mike that he can share with the participants. Because again, we could talk about this for forever. But I think back, Mike.
I would love that, Karen.